huge amount of work that went into Sex for Work, the true cost of our tea. Now just give us some background into what inspired you to carry out this piece of work.
So it all started with me pitching to the BBC a story about the land where these tea plantations are. And the land was taken forcefully in the 1920s by the British. And so the locals have launched a case in the UK trying to reclaim 400,000 acres where the tea fields are. And while I was investigating that, I came across people working in the tea plantations. And the women especially started telling me, okay, land is a very emotive issue. But you need also to look at, they call it the spreading of legs. So I was like, I didn't understand what they meant by the spreading of legs. So I talked to another woman and she told me the same thing from a different part of the plantation.
What is it that she told you?
She told me, you need to look at, there's this issue of spreading the legs and it's really affecting us. So then I spoke to another woman and she also intimated to me the same thing. But, so I talked to my editor and I was like, okay, the reconnaissance is going on fine about the land issue. But there's also this issue that these women keep telling me about. And so he asked me, go and find out, because it seems there's a pattern of what they're talking about. I still didn't understand what they were trying to tell me. So he gave me 2 days of my 2-week reconnaissance to look into what they were trying to communicate. And so they translated it to basically, that when they go to apply for jobs as tea pickers, the recruiters ask them to sleep with them for the jobs. And in order for them to sustain these much sought after jobs, they had to keep sleeping with them almost on a daily basis. And what had happened was that now many of them were HIV positive. Their marriages were broken because their husbands get to hear about them sleeping with their bosses. And it had horrendous effects that I was shocked. And
so it almost seems like this is public knowledge in as far as those that are working in the tea plantations is concerned.
Yes.
And this doesn't stop the managers or those that are sleeping with the workers from doing this?
That's what shocked me, and how widespread it was. So when I got back to him, I had spoken with I talked to 7 women, and they told me the same thing. So he said, okay, let's halt the investigation into land, and let's look at these allegations of sexual abuse. So he gave me another 2 weeks to look into it. And in those 2 weeks, I met 50 women who told me the same thing, that they have to sleep with their bosses in order to maintain their jobs. And the impact is devastating because they're getting children out of wedlock, and it's breaking their marriages.
So is this unprotected sex?
Yes, it is. So many of them either don't know their status because they're too afraid to go and get checked, or they're HIV positive.
So let's talk about the managers that are perpetrating this sex for work.
Yeah.
Is it a big group of managers? Did you look at a number of farms or a number of plantations?
Yes, we chose to look into the 2 biggest tea farms in the country. So that's James Finley and Company and Ekaterra. So while these women were telling us that this is happening to them, it was mostly, at that particular point, we had no proof. It was, there were claims or allegations against the company. So when we did another reconnaissance, another 2-week reconnaissance, and we got 50 more women. And we got the names of the alleged abusers, and then we compiled lists of the names that were constantly being repeated by women who are working in different, because it's 400,000 acres.
She says massive.
That's massive. So they're from, different parts of those plantations and under different managers.
Now, when we talk about 400,000 hectares, you said?
Acres.
400,000 acres. It's a massive space. How many owners are there of these?
There's just 2 companies.
2 companies own the 400,000 acres.
We have 2 companies that own those plantations, and they're the major tea producers in Kenya. which is one of the biggest exporters of tea globally. And those companies are James Finley and Co., which is registered in the UK, and Ekaterra, which was formerly Unilever. And Unilever has been a multinational that also was registered in the UK, but now they sold it to a company, another company in Europe. So these managers, we're talking about at least 100 officials whose names were given to us by the women. But we looked at repeat
offenders.
Like one woman would say, this guy abused me, and then another woman from a different plantation would say, the same guy was responsible for the abuse. And so those are the guys we targeted in our investigation. So we compiled a list of the people we are going to target. Then we set up, we recruited undercover reporters. Because at that particular point, what the women were telling us were just allegations. It was their word. So we needed to get proof of what they were saying. And the best way we thought we could get proof of what they were saying was through video, and undercover video.
So before the recruitment of the undercover investigators, you did not have a conversation with the authorities or any of the management of the plantations?
No. The reason is we didn't know how far up these violations or how far up the people in management knew what was going on. And so if we went to complain, then the women had told us before that there were attempts to do reports by, I think, Kenya Human Rights Commission. And what happened was that the guys temporarily stopped abusing them. And then when they realized there were no consequences, in less than a year, they had gone back to their ways.
So let's come back to, you've recruited these individuals, these young women, I presume, as undercover investigators. What then happened next?
So we set up a base. We studied what they had told us in terms of the times that these guys approached them with the request for sex. So we realized during recruitment, at the peak of this institutionalized sexual abuse, you'll have lines of thousands of people trying to get jobs in the plantations. At the peak, before they introduced machines to pick the tea, we had at least 100,000 workers working there, at least. Because I've had estimates of 240,000, but I can't verify that. So you'll have lines of thousands of people trying to get those jobs. So they line up at the recruitment center. And these women told us, those recruiters will just come and ask them, are you going to give me money? Are you going to give me sex? Just openly. So we targeted a recruitment drive. But apparently they had changed tack. These women were talking about the past. So the recruitment drives, we didn't get any of the women being asked openly for sex. So what we did was now target the individual managers, because we realized another way people got recruited was just sending them messages and asking for a job. And the first guy we sent a message to was this guy by the name of Chebo Chok. And he had worked in James Finley and Company for years, decades actually, 3 decades. And then he had retired and started his own company, which was providing labor, which was contracted by James Finley to provide labor there. And what he did was shocked us, because the first thing he asked was for the picture. There's no interview process where anybody asks for your picture unless you're interviewing to go and act or something.
Unless you're customer facing.
Yeah.
So to speak,
Yeah. So he asked for her picture. And when she sent her picture, he was like, let's meet. And the meeting was supposed to take place in a hotel. So the women had already told us this is what happens, but it was, you know, it was mind-blowing to think that somebody just parks his car outside our hotel, waiting for women to text him, asking for a job. And then he's already booked a room the whole day. And the interview is supposed to take place in the room. And that's what he would do on a daily basis. And if he doesn't get a request for a job interview, because we had done our surveillance, he would go back to the women he's employed and sleep with them in the plantation.
Was there a conversation in your mind behind closed doors between the parliamentary committee
And the
companies? Because you're an investigative journalist,
Yeah.
and you're fully aware that if you went out into this public space and you asked these women to come out and point a finger at the perpetrators, it wasn't going to happen.
It wasn't going to happen.
Right?
Yeah.
So you would expect that an office or an institution such as a parliament would have the same skill set or desire to expose.
That's a very good question. This is the reality we live with, and I cannot rule out the fact that it may have been a bribe-taking mission. Because, you know, why would they ask these women to appear publicly? Why wouldn't they call me and ask me, hey, how did you go about getting these confessions?
Are you aware of the constitution of the members of the parliamentary committee that went?
Yes.
The reason I ask is,
Yes.
were there any women in that committee?
There were, and even when we did our launch in Kenya, we had a forum afterwards, and some of those parliamentarians participated in. But the nature in Kenya is that our society is very corrupt. And because of my work now, before I was a crime reporter, so I saw the corruption on the police end. But now, on the most vulnerable in our society, I focus mainly on children and women. I realized that people don't have, you know, you'd expect them to draw a line and say, these victims have nobody, you know, to defend them against what they're going through. So let's be their defenders. No, they wouldn't. They would team up with the perpetrators because the perpetrators are willing to give something in return while the victims have nothing to give. So I would not rule out any kind of, you know, agreement between the companies and the parliamentary commission, because the companies would not want you know, parliament investigating them closely, because they may find other things that